I bought my dream car with money I saved for 5 years. My sister stole it, crashed it, then laughed in my face saying our parents would force me to forgive her. She had no idea I'd already filed the insurance claim that would change her life forever. Want to know what happened when she found out? Keep watching, because this gets good. Have you ever worked years for something only to watch someone destroy it in seconds? That's exactly what happened to me, and I promise you, the revenge I got was worth every sleepless night. Let me tell you about my sister Jaime. While I spent 5 years working double shifts, skipping vacations, and driving a car held together with duct tape and prayers, she floated through life on a cloud of parental favoritism and zero consequences. Every dollar I earned went into my savings account. Every birthday, every Christmas, every bonus check. I had one goal: buy myself a brand new car with my own money. No loans, no help, just pure hard-earned cash. The day I finally signed those papers and drove off the lot, I cried. Not sad tears, but the kind of tears that come when you realize you actually did something you thought was impossible. I ran my hands over that steering wheel, breathed in that new car smell, and thought about every sacrifice I'd made to get here. This wasn't just a car. It was proof that I could set a goal and achieve it without anyone's help. I drove straight to my parents' house because I wanted to show them what I'd accomplished. I wanted them to see that their responsible daughter had done something incredible. When I pulled into the driveway, Jaime was already there, leaning against the garage wall, scrolling through her phone with that bored expression she always wore. She barely glanced up when I parked. Just gave the car a once-over and said, "Nice ride." "What's the mileage?" "Less than 100, I told her, trying to keep the pride out of my voice because I knew how she got when I had something she didn't. She walked over and peered through the window like she was inspecting merchandise at a store. Then, without asking, without even looking at me, she reached for the door handle and pulled it open. "Let me take it for a spin," she said, already moving to climb in. I grabbed the door and slammed it shut before she could get inside. "No way," I said firmly. "I just got it." "You're not driving it." She rolled her eyes like I just refused to let her borrow a pen. "Come on, Annie, don't be such a control freak. It's just a car. Just a car." Those words made my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm. "It's just a car that I paid for," I said. "You don't get to take it." For a moment, she just stared at me, and I saw something flicker across her face. Not acceptance, not understanding, but calculation. She was already planning her next move. She backed away with this little smile that made my stomach drop, shrugged, and walked back toward the house. I should have known better. I should have taken my keys and left immediately. But I was so excited to show my parents the car that I made a fatal mistake. I went inside. I left my keys on the entryway table for maybe 5 minutes while I ran upstairs to grab something from my room. When I came back down, the keys were gone. My heart stopped. I ran outside just in time to see my taillights disappearing down the street, tires squealing as Jaime sped away in my brand new car. I called her phone over and over, but every call went straight to voicemail. I paced the driveway for 2 hours, my hands shaking with rage, my mind spinning with disbelief that she would actually do this. My parents tried to calm me down, kept saying she'd be back soon, that I was overreacting, that she was just taking it for a quick drive. But I knew Jaime. I knew she'd taken my keys specifically because I'd told her no, because she couldn't stand being denied something she wanted. When my phone finally rang 2 hours later, it wasn't Jaime's number. It was an unknown caller. I answered with my heart in my throat. "Miss Anderson," a deep male voice said. "This is Officer Reynolds with the County Police Department. I'm calling regarding a vehicle registered under your name." My legs nearly gave out. "What happened?" I managed to whisper. "There's been an accident." A pause that felt like an eternity. "The driver is unharmed, but the vehicle sustained significant damage." "Who was driving?" I asked, even though I already knew. "A young woman who identified herself as Jaime Anderson," he said. "Your sister?" I don't remember driving to the crash site. One moment, I was standing in my parents' entryway gripping my phone, and the next I was pulling up behind flashing police lights, staring at what was left of my dream car. The front bumper was completely destroyed, crumpled like paper. The hood was caved in. One headlight was shattered, glass scattered across the pavement. And there she was, standing next to the wreckage with her arms crossed, looking completely unbothered. Like this was just another Tuesday. Like she hadn't just destroyed 5 years of my life in one reckless joyride. I got out of my old car and walked toward her, my hands trembling with a rage I'd never felt before. "What the hell did you do?" I demanded. She turned to face me, and I will never forget what happened next. She smirked. actually smirked at me, standing next to my destroyed car, and said, "Yeah, that sucks. But don't freak out. Mom and Dad will make you forgive me." Those words hit me like a physical blow. Not an apology, not remorse, not even a hint of guilt. Just pure, arrogant certainty that no matter what she did, no matter how much she hurt me, our parents would smooth it over just like they always had. In that moment, something inside me snapped. Something that had been bending and flexing under years of her entitlement, years of watching her get away with everything, years of being told to be the bigger person, to forgive, to let it go. I realized right then, standing in the flashing lights of police cars, staring at my ruined dream, that I was done. I was done being the responsible one, done being the one who sacrificed, done being the one who forgave. Jaime thought she knew how this story ended, but she had no idea what I was planning. The officer approached me with a clipboard, his expression professional but sympathetic. He could probably tell I was barely holding it together. He asked me questions about the car, about insurance, about whether I wanted to press charges. That last question hung in the air between us like a lifeline I hadn't realized I needed. Press charges, I repeated slowly, the words feeling foreign on my tongue, against my own sister. The officer nodded carefully, clearly not wanting to influence my decision either way. "Ma'am, she did take your vehicle without permission. That is technically theft. Whether you choose to pursue that legally is entirely up to you." I glanced over at Jaime, who was now talking to another officer, gesturing wildly with her hands, probably spinning some story about how this was all just a misunderstanding. How she'd thought I wouldn't mind. How it was basically her car, too, because we were family. The audacity of it made me want to scream. But instead, I took a deep breath and told the officer I needed time to think about it. He handed me his card and told me to call if I decided to move forward. As I drove away that night in my sad little backup car, watching my destroyed dream disappear in the rearview mirror, I made a decision. I wasn't going to press criminal charges. That would be too easy, too quick, too public. No. What I had in mind was going to hit Jaime where it really hurt, and she wouldn't see it coming until it was far too late. I woke up the next morning feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My head pounded, my body ached, and my mind kept replaying the image of Jaime's smirk over and over like a nightmare on repeat. My beautiful car destroyed. 5 years of sacrifice gone in an instant, and my sister standing there like it was nothing, like my anger was an inconvenience to her day. I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Dad, and a text from Jaime that made my blood boil all over again. "Stop being dramatic, Annie. It's just a car. Mom and Dad said we'll figure it out, so quit acting like it's the end of the world. Just a car. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just more dismissal, more arrogance, more proof that she genuinely believed the rules didn't apply to her." I got dressed slowly, forcing myself to breathe, forcing myself to think clearly instead of just reacting. Because I knew if I showed up at my parents' house in a rage, they'd use that against me. They'd make it about my anger instead of Jaime's actions. They'd twist it until I was the problem that needed fixing. But before I went to see them, I had another stop to make. I drove to the police station and requested a copy of the accident report. The officer at the desk was efficient and professional, handing me the paperwork within 15 minutes. I sat in my car in the parking lot and read through every detail. The report was damning. It documented that Jaime had been driving recklessly, that she'd been speeding, that she'd run a red light before colliding with a concrete barrier. It noted that she had admitted to taking the vehicle without the owner's explicit permission. It was all there, in black and white, official and undeniable. I made 3 copies of that report. 1 for my records, 1 for what I was planning to do next, and 1 for insurance purposes. Because I had realized something sitting there in that parking lot, staring at the official documentation of my sister's recklessness. Jaime had spent her entire life being shielded from consequences, but there was one entity that our parents couldn't manipulate or charm or guilt trip into submission. The insurance company. They didn't care about family dynamics or about keeping the peace. They cared about liability, about fault, about who was responsible for paying for the damage. And I was going to make absolutely certain that responsibility fell exactly where it belonged. When I walked into my parents' kitchen an hour later, they were already sitting at the table looking like this whole situation was somehow my fault. Mom sighed heavily when she saw me, rubbing her temples like she was the victim here. Jaime sat slouched in a chair, scrolling through her phone, completely unbothered. "Annie, honey," Mom started, her voice dripping with false concern. "We need to talk about this situation because this anger you're holding onto isn't healthy for anyone." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Something dangerous and quiet and calculating. "My anger," I repeated slowly. "You think my anger is the problem here?" Mom and Dad exchanged one of those looks. That silent communication that told me they'd already decided how this was going to go. They were united and I was outnumbered. "Sweetheart," Mom said in that condescending tone she used when she wanted me to fall in line. "It's just a car. Jaime didn't mean to crash it, and we don't think it's fair to punish her so harshly for something that was clearly an accident." An accident? Like Jaime had accidentally taken my keys, accidentally stolen my car, accidentally wrecked it. "She stole it," I said flatly. I told her no. She took my keys anyway. "She stole my car, wrecked it, and then smirked in my face because she knew you would cover for her just like you always do." Jaime let out a dramatic sigh and finally looked up from her phone. "Jesus, sis, you're acting like I murdered someone." I made a mistake. "Chill out." Dad reached across the table and put his hand on mine, giving me that pleading look he always used when he wanted me to be reasonable. "Annie, you're her sister. I know you're upset, but family forgives. That's what we do. We forgive each other." I stared at him, at the sheer audacity of putting this on me, at making my feelings the problem instead of Jaime's actions, at expecting me to swallow my anger and pretend everything was fine so they could maintain their comfortable family dynamic. They wanted me to forgive her so they wouldn't have to deal with the consequences, so they wouldn't have to actually parent their golden child, so they could keep pretending that enabling Jaime wasn't slowly destroying any respect I had left for them. I realized in that moment that I'd spent my entire life being conditioned to accept this treatment, to believe my needs came second, to believe my anger was unjustified, to believe that keeping the peace was more important than standing up for myself. But I wasn't that person anymore, so I did something I'd never done before. I smiled. It was small, just a flicker at the corner of my mouth. But it was enough to make Dad pause, enough to make Jaime glance at me with something almost like suspicion. "You know what?" I said, keeping my voice light and pleasant. "You're absolutely right, Dad. Family forgives, and I don't want to hold on to this anger anymore." Relief flooded their faces instantly. Jaime's smirk returned full force. They all relaxed back into their chairs, convinced they'd won, convinced they'd successfully guilted me into submission like they always did. But they had no idea what I was planning. They had no idea that while I was sitting there smiling and nodding, I was already putting things in motion that would change everything. Mom actually reached over and patted my hand, her smile warm and approving, like I was a child who had finally learned her lesson. "That's my girl," she said softly. "I knew you'd come around. Family is the most important thing. Annie, we have to stick together." I nodded along, playing my part perfectly, watching as Jaime picked up her phone again, already dismissing me, already moving on to whatever pointless social media drama was currently occupying her attention span. Dad started talking about how we could all move forward from this, how maybe they could help me find a good used car to replace the one Jaime had destroyed, how everything would work out fine in the end. I let him talk, let him spin his little fantasy about how this would all blow over, about how we'd look back on this someday and laugh. The whole time, I was thinking about that insurance report in my bag, about the appointment I'd already made for the next morning, about the very specific way I was going to file my claim. I stayed for another hour, playing the dutiful daughter, the forgiving sister, the reasonable family member they'd always wanted me to be. I even managed to have a civil conversation with Jaime, who was so relieved that she wasn't facing any real consequences that she actually became almost pleasant. Almost. She still couldn't quite bring herself to apologize, but she did say something about how she was glad I wasn't being weird about everything anymore. That was as close as I was going to get, and honestly, I didn't care. Her words meant nothing to me now. The only thing that mattered was what I was going to do next. When I finally left, hugging my parents goodbye and giving Jaime a little wave, I felt lighter than I had in days. Not because I'd forgiven her, not because I'd let it go, but because I knew something they didn't. I knew that in less than 24 hours, Jaime's entire world was going to come crashing down around her. And I was going to be the one holding the sledgehammer. The insurance office was cold when I walked in the next morning, the air conditioning blasting against my skin while fire simmered in my chest. I'd spent the entire night going over every detail, making sure I knew exactly what to say, making sure I understood the implications of what I was about to do. I'd even called a friend who worked in insurance claims to get advice on the best way to approach this. She'd been hesitant at first, asking if I was sure I wanted to go through with it, warning me that this would have serious consequences for Jaime. When I told her what had happened, how Jaime had stolen my car and wrecked it and then smirked about it, my friend had gone quiet for a moment. Then she'd said, "Do it. File it as unauthorized use. She deserves everything that's coming to her." The man at the desk barely looked up as he typed something into his computer. "How can I help you today?" "I need to file a claim for my car," I said, keeping my voice steady and professional. He nodded, clicking through screens. "Was it an accident? Do you have a police report?" "Yes, there's a report," I said carefully, "and I need to report it as unauthorized use." That made him pause. He looked up at me, his eyebrows raised slightly. "Unauthorized use? Are you saying your vehicle was stolen?" I chose my words very carefully, knowing that what I said next would determine everything. I never gave permission for her to take it. I explicitly told her she couldn't drive my car, and she took it anyway. "That's theft, isn't it?" The man hesitated for only a second before nodding slowly. "If you can provide proof that you denied her permission and she took the vehicle regardless, then yes, this qualifies as unauthorized use." "Do you have any documentation?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the text messages. The ones where I'd told Jaime no. The ones where she'd laughed it off. Then I pulled out the police report, pointing to the section where Jaime had admitted to taking the vehicle without explicit permission. The insurance agent read through everything carefully, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. He asked me several more questions, documenting my answers, making sure he had all the information he needed. The whole process took about 45 minutes, but by the end of it, I could tell from his expression that my claim was going to be approved. "This should be sufficient," he said finally, typing rapidly into his system. "Since you're filing for unauthorized use, the liability will not fall on you. It will transfer to the driver." The driver? Jaime. The reality of it washed over me slowly. Jaime, who had spent her entire life escaping consequences, would finally have to answer for something. Jaime, who had laughed in my face and told me I'd have to forgive her, was about to learn what it felt like when the world didn't bend to her will. "How much are we talking about?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral even though my heart was racing. He glanced at his screen, adjusting his glasses. "Given the extent of the damage, the estimated total she'll be responsible for is somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000. The exact amount will depend on the final assessment from our adjuster, but it's definitely in that range. $30,000 to $40,000. I let that number sink in, let it roll over me like a wave of pure vindication. Jaime had never dealt with anything more than a slap on the wrist. But now that weight was about to come crashing down on her, and I wasn't going to lift a single finger to stop it. The agent continued, explaining the process, how Jaime would be notified, how she would have the option to dispute the claim, but would need legal representation and substantial evidence to overturn it. He explained that this would affect her insurance rates for years, possibly even make it difficult for her to get insurance at all. He told me that if she failed to pay, the insurance company could pursue legal action against her, potentially garnishing her wages or placing liens on any property she owned. Every word was music to my ears. This wasn't just about the money. This was about forcing Jaime to face reality, to understand that actions have consequences, to learn that she couldn't just coast through life taking whatever she wanted and leaving other people to clean up her messes. When I walked out of that office, the sun felt brighter. The air felt crisper, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt powerful. I felt free. I got in my car and just sat there for a moment, letting the satisfaction wash over me. Then I pulled out my phone and saw a notification. Jaime had posted on social media. I clicked on it, curious to see what she was saying, and felt my satisfaction grow even stronger. That night, I scrolled through social media and found Jaime's latest post. A picture of her at a bar with friends, drinks in hand. Her caption reading, "Tough day, but nothing a few drinks can't fix. Some people need to chill out and move on. Life's too short to stress about little things." Little things. My car, my sacrifice, my 5 years of hard work. All little things to her. I laughed out loud, a sound so foreign it startled me. Jaime thought she had won. She thought this was over, that our parents had bailed her out again, that everything was going back to normal. She had no idea that in about 3 business days, she was going to receive a very official-looking letter in the mail. A letter that would explain in excruciating detail exactly how much money she owed and exactly what would happen if she didn't pay. But what Jaime didn't know, what she wouldn't know until that insurance claim finished processing, was that this time I wasn't letting it go. This time Jaime was going to learn the hard way. And by the time she realized what I had done, it would already be too late. The next few days were surprisingly peaceful. I went to work, came home, lived my life, and tried not to think too much about what was coming. I knew the insurance company had sent Jaime the notification. I knew she'd received it because my parents had started calling me again, leaving voicemails that progressively got more urgent, more demanding, more desperate. I didn't answer, not yet. I wanted them to stew in it for a while, wanted them to really understand the magnitude of what was happening before I had to face them again. On the third day, my mom showed up at my apartment. I heard the knocking and checked the peephole, seeing her standing there looking tired and frustrated. For a moment, I considered not answering, but I knew that would only delay the inevitable. I opened the door, and before I could even say hello, she pushed past me into my apartment. "We need to talk about what you've done," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Do you have any idea what you're putting your sister through?" I closed the door slowly and turned to face her, keeping my expression neutral. "I filed an insurance claim for my destroyed car." "That's what I did." Mom shook her head, her hands gesturing wildly. "You filed it as theft, Annie. You're making it look like she stole from you. She's your sister. This is going to ruin her." "She did steal from me," I said calmly. "I told her she couldn't take my car. She took it anyway." "That's the definition of theft." Mom's face flushed red, her jaw clenching. "You're being vindictive. This isn't about the car anymore. This is about you wanting to punish her, wanting to hurt her because you're angry. But this is too far, Annie. This is going to follow her for years. Do you understand that? Years of bad credit, years of financial burden, years of struggling to recover from this. And for what? For a car? For my car," I corrected, my voice harder now. "For 5 years of my life that I spent saving every penny. For the pride I felt when I finally achieved something on my own. For all of that, which she destroyed in one night because she couldn't accept being told no." Mom took a deep breath, clearly trying to calm herself, trying to approach this from a different angle. "Annie, sweetheart, I understand you're hurt." "I do. But family is supposed to forgive each other. Family is supposed to help each other, not destroy each other. What you're doing to Jaime right now, it's cruel. It's not the person I raised you to be." That statement hung in the air between us, heavy and loaded with years of resentment that I'd never fully acknowledged until now. "You're right," I said slowly. "This isn't the person you raised me to be. The person you raised me to be would have swallowed her anger and forgiven Jaime and moved on and pretended everything was fine. The person you raised me to be would have sacrificed her own needs and her own feelings to keep the family peace. But I'm not that person anymore, Mom. I'm done being that person." Mom stared at me like I was a stranger. "So what, you're just going to let your sister's life fall apart? You're going to stand by and watch her struggle and suffer and not do anything to help her?" "Yes," I said simply. "That's exactly what I'm going to do. Because maybe if she actually faces real consequences for once in her life, she'll learn something. Maybe she'll finally understand that other people matter, that other people's things matter, that she can't just take and take and take without ever giving anything back." Mom's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel the guilt I would have expected. I didn't feel the need to comfort her, or reassure her, or take back what I'd said. Instead, I just felt tired. "If you don't undo this," Mom said quietly, her voice shaking, "you're going to tear this family apart." "Is that really what you want? If the only way to keep this family together is for me to let Jaime walk all over me, then maybe it's not a family worth keeping together," I replied. The words seemed to physically hurt her. She took a step back, her hand going to her chest, her face crumpling with emotion. "I can't believe you just said that," she whispered. "After everything we've done for you, after everything we've given you, this is how you treat us?" "What have you done for me?" I asked, my voice rising now. "What have you given me that you haven't also given to Jaime? The only difference is that I've actually appreciated it and worked hard and tried to make something of myself, while Jaime has taken everything for granted and coasted through life expecting everyone else to clean up after her. And you've enabled that, Mom. You and Dad have enabled her bad behavior for so long that she genuinely believes she's entitled to whatever she wants, including my car, including my forgiveness, including my willingness to just forget about what she did." Mom opened her mouth to respond, but I held up my hand to stop her. "I'm done with this conversation. I said firmly. The insurance claim is filed, it's being processed, and nothing you say is going to change my mind. If Jaime wants to dispute it, she can hire a lawyer. If she wants to pay it off, she can figure out how. But I'm not helping her, and I'm not undoing what I've done. Mom stared at me for a long moment, her expression cycling through anger and hurt and disbelief, and something that looked almost like respect, though she'd never admit it. Finally, she turned and walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. "You're going to regret this," she said quietly. "One day you're going to look back and realize you threw away your family over something material, something that could have been replaced. And you're going to wish you'd made a different choice." "Maybe," I said, "but I doubt it." She left without another word, and I stood there in my empty apartment feeling strangely at peace, because for the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself. I had refused to be the person who sacrificed everything for the sake of keeping other people comfortable. I had chosen myself, and it felt good. The dinner invitation came exactly 1 week after I'd filed the insurance claim. My father called this time, his voice carefully neutral as he told me that the family needed to sit down and discuss this situation like adults. He said it was important that we all be in the same room, that we needed to clear the air and find a path forward. I knew what this really was. It was an ambush. A carefully orchestrated intervention designed to pressure me into backing down. But I agreed to come anyway, because I had something I wanted to say to all of them, something that had been building inside me for years. When I arrived at my parents' house, the table was set like it was Thanksgiving. Candles flickering, the smell of roasted chicken filling the air, everything carefully arranged to create the illusion of a peaceful family gathering. It was manipulative and obvious, and it only strengthened my resolve. Mom sat at the head of the table looking composed but tense. Dad bustled around serving food, playing the role of the cheerful host, trying to keep everyone comfortable. And Jaime sat across from me with that insufferable smirk plastered across her face, her phone next to her plate because she couldn't even pretend this mattered to her. But I noticed something different about her smirk this time. It wasn't quite as confident as before. There was a tightness around her eyes, a tension in her shoulders that suggested she was more worried than she was letting on. We ate in uncomfortable silence for a few minutes, everyone waiting for someone else to start the conversation, to break the tension that hung over the table like a storm cloud. Finally, Jaime set down her fork and leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms in that defensive posture she always adopted when she felt attacked. "So have you calmed down? Or are you still planning to throw a tantrum over a stupid car?" I just smiled, a small, unreadable smile, and watched as her confidence wavered slightly. Watched as my parents exchanged nervous glances, clearly not sure how to interpret my reaction. Dad let out a dramatic sigh, taking on his role as mediator. "Annie, sweetheart, I know this has been stressful, but we really need to put this behind us as a family. Jaime made a mistake, but you holding on to this anger isn't going to fix anything. And this insurance claim, honey, it's just too harsh. It's going to cause problems for Jaime that will last for years." Mom nodded, cutting into her chicken without looking at me. "Life is too short to get caught up in things like this, Annie. At the end of the day, it's just a car. Things can be replaced. But family is forever. You can't replace family." I could see the satisfaction starting to build in Jaime again. Could see her ego inflating slightly, her smirk growing more pronounced as she assumed this was going the way it always did. She picked up her fork, twirling it between her fingers, shaking her head with mock disappointment. "Seriously, sis, you need to chill. I swear you've always been like this, overreacting, making everything a huge deal. I mean, come on, I wrecked a car, not your entire life. You'll get over it." That was when I moved. I reached beneath the table where I'd placed my bag, pulled out the thick manila envelope, and placed it directly in front of Jaime with deliberate precision. The sound of thick paper hitting the polished wood was loud enough to make everyone pause mid-motion. Jaime barely glanced at it, her smirk still firmly in place as she rolled her eyes. "What's this? Some angry letter about how I hurt your feelings? A list of all the ways I've wronged you over the years?" "Read it," I said simply, my voice even and calm and utterly devoid of emotion. Something in my tone must have caught her attention, because for the first time that night, her amusement wavered. Her smirk faltered slightly as she reached for the envelope, her fingers hesitating for just a second before tearing it open. I watched her face carefully, savoring every micro-expression, every tiny shift in her features as she processed what she was seeing. The moment she pulled out the papers, the moment her eyes scanned the words printed across the top in bold, official lettering, The color drained from her face so quickly it was almost comical. I watched in silence as her hands began to shake, as her mouth opened and closed without producing any sound, as her entire posture shifted from smug arrogance to quiet. Dawning horror. Dad frowned, glancing between us with confusion, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. "Annie, what is this? What did you give her?" Jaime's voice came out as barely a whisper, her fingers gripping the document so tightly that the edges crumpled under the pressure. Her eyes scanning the same lines over and over as if reading them multiple times would somehow change what they said. "What did you do?" I took a slow sip of my wine, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make them all uncomfortable, just long enough for the full weight of reality to settle onto Jaime's shoulders like a lead blanket. That, dear sister, is the finalized insurance report. The one that officially classifies your use of my vehicle as unauthorized. The one that transfers full liability for all damages directly to you. The one that means you personally owe between $30,000 and $40,000 for destroying my car. The air in the room shifted instantly, becoming thick and suffocating with tension so heavy I could almost taste it. The sudden realization hit my parents like a slap across the face, their expressions transforming from confusion to shock to something approaching panic. Mom finally looked up from her plate, her fork clattering against her dish, her eyes sharp and calculating as she tried to piece together exactly what had just happened. Tried to understand how Jaime had gone from untouchable to drowning in debt in the span of 30 seconds. Dad grabbed the papers from Jaime's shaking hands and started flipping through them frantically, his breath coming in short gasps as he processed the numbers printed clearly in bold ink throughout the document. And Jaime, for the first time in her entire spoiled, entitled life, looked genuinely, deeply afraid. Her face had gone pale, her eyes were wide and glassy, and her hands were trembling so badly she had to clasp them together in her lap to stop them from shaking. I'd never felt more satisfied in my entire existence.